Hey guys, this is Colin Zhu, aka the Chef Doc, and I know it's been a minute since the last time you and I have spoken, and I want to thank you so much for following the Thrive Bites podcast. And I just want to let you know that there's good reason for that, and let me explain. In almost 6 months, I've been working tirelessly and diligently to helping people near and far during this tumultuous year that we've had from 2020 into 2021. And I said to myself, what more can I do to inspire and impact others? And you guys know me, I'm all about thriving. I'm all about thriving from an emotional, mental, and physical standpoint. That is the reason why I wrote Thrive Medicine, and that is the reason why I started this podcast called Thrive Bites. And so I decided that I wanted to put together a virtual summit experience, gathering over 50 speakers. That includes physicians, dietitians, fitness experts, coaches, and spanning over 5 pillars in teaching someone else on learning how to thrive. And I call this the Thrive Formula. The 5 pillars consist of food as medicine, functional fitness, relationships, community, and resilience. And the reason why I've chosen to do this is because I really wanted to give more tools, more education, and more inspiration, and letting people know that they're not alone and they don't have to be ill-equipped for life and whatever life throws at you, whether it's a curveball, whether it's an obstacle, whether it's a roadblock. And I worked really hard to provide this, and I'm happy to announce that it is fully released and fully accessible. And you may ask yourself, who is this for and what does it consist of? This is for the individual that prioritizes their health and wellness and also wants to take charge of their own well-being. It's also for the healthcare professional and the healthcare professional student, because I wanted to create a summit experience that I wish I could have had when I was in school. The summit experience has over 50 plus hours plus more, ranging from culinary demonstrations to fitness demonstrations to scientific medical sessions. And we answer questions like, what is whole foods plant-based cooking? How do I start cooking back in my kitchen? What affects my brain, gut, and immune health? What are the tools for my own emotional and mental well-being? How can I be more of service and lead by example? What kind of nutrition do I need to give my children nowadays? To how do I navigate self-doubt, self-sabotage, my inner critic? To what are the best physical movements to increase my mobility, strength, flexibility, and function? And one of my favorites is, how do I create more joy, contentment, and happiness in my own life? This summit also works like a masterclass series where you get to learn and further your education. And I do this by providing quizzes with every session, and I provide workbooks. And there's also recipes and very, very special speaker bonuses. You'll also have the opportunity to join a private Facebook community to further your growth and connect with like-minded individuals. So if this resonates with you, please join us on this journey to further yourself and take back 2021 and beyond. You can find us at thethriveformula.co. That's THETHR formula.co. And come on inside, and I'll see you in there. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome to Thrive Bites, the official podcast of Dr. Colin Zhu, aka the Chef Doc. On every episode, I talk with health and wellness experts from all over the world, such as doctors, chefs, dietitians, coaches, and many more. And I sit down with them and have casual conversations about plant-based lifestyle, how to elevate our emotional resilience, and what it really means to thrive. And I bring all of this to you. So let's get to this week's episode. Okay, guys, well, welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites. I'm your host, Colin Zhu, and thank you for listening on. So I have a special guest with us today. His name is Dr. Harry Karydes. Say hi, everyone, Harry.
Hi, everybody.
Well, thank you so much for joining and hopping onto the show. I am so excited for you to be here. For those of you who don't know who he is a emergency physician, medical toxicologist, and a medical director by trade. He practices in the Chicagoland area. And I love this guy. He, understands the issues that physicians face every day. He talks about stress, lack of motivation, mental fatigue, and how that has been very, very common in our practice of medicine. For those of you that are, non-healthcare professionals, we also physicians face that as well. So I'm very excited for him to be here to, share a story and to really go into it. Harry, I'd like to start off the session really getting to know our guests. And, I really believe in the power of storytelling and, sharing, how does someone go from point A to point B? So let's start off by asking, tell me your story. How did you get into emergency medicine and your subsequent field?
Sure. And there's a story there too. So I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on the show. So actually, I wasn't actually sure I was going to go into emergency medicine, quite honestly, Colin. I was born and raised here in Chicago, and I went to University of Illinois down in Urbana-Champaign. And I always loved biology. I always loved the sciences. I always loved medicine. But wasn't really sure I wanted to make that commitment to go into medical school. It's a long path to become a physician, but I knew I wanted to stay somewhere in medicine, perhaps. And a lot of my community that I lived in, my neighborhood that I lived in, were, paramedics, Chicago firefighters, Chicago policemen. That's what the community was. So I went to college, I got my degree in biology, but while in college, I love sports. I've loved sports ever since I was a little kid. And I remember going to these huge football games and, big hockey games. And I remember going there telling my friends, like, how do we get closer? How do we get closer to the action? And one of the surest ways we found was we have to get on the sidelines. And the way we can get on the sideline is you become part of the medical team. So I became an emergency medical technician. I got my training as an EMT basic at U of I. Really selfishly, just so I can get closer to the action. And my path at that point, Colin, was I was just going to graduate. I was probably going to go ahead and just become a paramedic. That was really my goal, was to become a Chicago paramedic, because that's what I knew. So actually, that was my path. I started working on a private ambulance company here in Chicago because at that time, and I'm pretty sure it's still the same way as it is now, is you can't just become a Chicago paramedic. You have to go through paramedic school, which I did. And then you have to put your name on what they call the list. And what the list is this nebulous list that the Chicago Fire Department has. And when it's time to have new paramedics, to hire new paramedics to fill the seats of the retired medics, they open up this list and they go down the list. And if whoever you are on the list, they call you to begin processing. And that at that time was about 2 years. That's what we were told. It takes about 2 years after you get your paramedic license to get called up to become a Chicago paramedic. So I was working as a Chicago paramedic with a private ambulance company. But then I also started working as an intern, just as my training with the Chicago Fire Department. And I remember telling my partner, after we brought in a very horrible trauma, it's just multiple gunshot wounds. We brought that patient to Cook County Hospital, and which is our one of the biggest trauma centers we have here in the Midwest. And I remember bringing this patient in the trauma bay, and it was just exactly what you would imagine seeing on TV. But we walk in, the patient, but the thing that I still remember is every physician in there, every nurse in that trauma bay had a sense of calm about them. Everybody had a role. Everybody knew what their role was. And it was just such a well-oiled machine. And I remember leaving that patient. I remember turning to my partner, I go, you know what, if I ever got to medical school, this is what I'd want to do, and this is where I'd want to do it. And my partner, just in typical Chicago style, he's just like, well, just go do it. Like, all right, I might as well just go do it. And that's what I did. And that's exactly what I did, Colin. I applied to medical school. And the funny story about all this is, from the time I became a paramedic, And I got accepted into medical school 6 months later. And then 6 months later, 6 months and 1 week later, I got a letter from the Chicago Fire Department saying, you know what, Harry, your name was selected. You can go ahead and begin processing at the Chicago Fire Academy. And I'm like, my goodness, what I was thinking was going to be a 2-year wait was actually 6 months and 1 week. But I actually had gotten into medical school. I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to go to medical school with the hope of becoming an emergency physician. And that's what I did. I became laser focused on becoming an emergency physician. And, luckily I actually got into Cook County Hospital's emergency medicine residency program. And that's where it all began for me.
Wow, that's awesome. So you started off as a EMT first before you went into it. That's awesome.
Yep, that's exactly right.
That triggered. So I love Chicago. Number one, I have a lot of friends. I do have some family members there, and I'm not a Midwesterner, so if it weren't for the 2/3, winter of the year, I would, absolutely love it. It's such a gorgeous place. And it also brought me, like, when you were talking about being, in the sidelines and in the stands, I remember doing. So I'm a very physically active person myself, and I remember doing a Spartan race within Wrigley Field, and it was a lot of fun doing that. And it's emergency medicine is and I practice family medicine, and I've done emergency medicine rotations, and it definitely invites and it caters to someone that needs to be able to be calm in the midst of a storm, and not everyone is really cut, out of that cloth, to do that. And it definitely takes, a very special person. And probably, you were mentioning about the trauma bay and how everyone was working, so, within their respective roles and acting like a team. And, that's kind of like a nice analogy to, baseball, and how everyone has their own specific role and acts like a team as well. So I'm sure it was nonstop. And it was just exciting. Do you have any, I guess, highlighted moments during your career that you can think of off the top of your head? Like, what's the most, eye-catching or eye-popping, moment that you've encountered?
There's so many of them. I think, being at a level 1 trauma center, there's just so many of them. You see, a lot of, I wouldn't say evil, but I guess we'll call a lot of evil that happens. But in almost probably even the same shift, you see some of the humanity and some of the love we have for each other. So there's so many great stories I have during my time as a resident, even before I became an attending. But I remember one of our trauma surgeons, she was such a phenomenal, Dr. Joseph, I still remember her so well, African-American trauma surgeon. And at that time, it was not very common to see a female trauma surgeon. And I remember here in Chicago, still so, but at that time, even more so, perhaps there was a lot of gang activity. And it was easy to kind of go down that rabbit hole of, I can't believe these young kids are really harming each other. They're shooting each other. They're killing each other. And I remember her telling us, and it's always stayed with me. I remember her telling the team, telling the group, she's like, you guys will never know what these kids are going through. You will never know. You are privileged. You've lived a very privileged life. You will never know that had they been given a choice, had they been given some resource, had they been given some place other to do, they would have chosen a life of being in gangs. But this is a life that they've come to, and that always stayed with me. It's always been a part of me that it's easy to judge, but it's also more important to say, let's step back a little bit and see how we can help others and be part of a community rather than part of offering solutions rather than being part of the problem.
Yeah, definitely. It comes back to, our training with compassion and empathy, and, taking the Hippocratic Oath and, being, of service and doing no harm to others. And, with the pandemic, and, with, Black Lives Matter, those I guess, issues come back again, in terms of, COVID with, health disparities, based off of, systemic racism. And, so she presents like a very good point in terms of just a simple concept of, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Right. And imagining, because we can never be in someone's shoes. Right. And just imagining, what is that person, can face, what do they face every day? What is their life on a day-to-day, basis, and trying your best to not judge a book by its cover, because you just don't know what people, deal with on a day-to-day. And so that also applies to, physicians as well. A lot of your work currently is revolving around physician burnout and physician wellness. And it's kind of funny how we can use, how it's interesting how we can use trauma, what the things that we face in emergency medicine to trauma within oneself,
Sure.
like emotional and mental turmoil. And I don't know how much of the audience, know or not know, because I know that physicians are growing more and more mindful of physician wellness, burnout, and suicide within the physician community. But what was the turning point in your career that maybe you have faced it yourself, or you've witnessed and observed other people facing it? Like, what was the turning point that you kind of shifted, to lead you to this road? Hey guys, we're going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey guys, this is Colin Zhu, aka the Chef Doc, and thank you so much for taking the time out to listen to my podcast. On my podcast, we talk about eating and cooking and living from a whole foods, plant-based approach. And between my patients, clients, and my audience listeners, I get a lot of questions of, hey doc, how do I get started on how to set up a kitchen? Or what should I buy? What should I make? Is there something beyond a salad, broccoli, and a smoothie? I know in our fast-paced life and during a pandemic, it is much more challenging to be able to teach yourself and learning how to cook. And so I partner up with Listenable, who is a leader in audio educational courses that are bite-sized. And I went ahead and created a course on how to get started on a whole foods, plant-based lifestyle. And in this course, I put in my best tips, tools, and tricks on everything that I've learned on how to get someone started, to eating more plants, getting healthier for you and your family. I talk about how to set up your kitchen, from the pantry to the fridge, the freezer, to how to navigate the supermarket, to what kind of utensils and appliances one needs to have, to what do we need to make, how to meal prep, what kind of cooking techniques there are, and what exactly is whole foods plant-based. And I'm able to make this course over 10 lessons. Each of those lessons are less than 10 minutes long. And you'll be able to finish this in an hour. You could even do it while commuting, exercising, or even walking your dog. And in addition, you can choose from over 3,000 plus original audio lessons created by well-loved experts. Just use the coupon code COLINZHU, COLINZHU, on listenable.io, and you'll be able to get 30% off a year of Listenable. So definitely check that out in the show notes, and check out the course on how to get started on a whole foods plant-based lifestyle. And I'll see you there. Thanks for listening, and now back to Thrive Bites. Welcome back to Thrive Bites. Let's get back to the interview.
Sure. So I can remember this day and very, very vividly, and I hope it stays with me actually, because it keeps me where I'm at. It drives me. So as an emergency physician, we always kid with each other, is you always know how the night shift went as soon as you walk in through the ambulance bay doors and see the look of your colleague's face that you're going to be taking over care from. And I remember walking into the ambulance bay on this very beautiful but blustery fall morning many years ago, and he just really had a rough shift, really just annihilated, just a rough, busy shift. So we chit-chatted for a little bit, and our shifts typically start at 6 a.m. My group's shifts typically start at 6 a.m., and you're by yourself for the better part of the morning. And so I remember I saw by 7 a.m. in the morning, I had seen approximately 7 patients, which is a pretty good clip for a community ED. That's where I'm mostly at now, the community emergency department. It's a pretty good clip for that type of turnaround, those number of patients. But I remember as I was leaving one of the rooms, I remember I was leaving the room with my head down because the last patient I had seen had a pretty large hand laceration. And I remember saying to myself, oh my goodness, I've already seen 7 patients, and hand lacs take some time to repair because you have to do them just right because it's of the hand. Mm-hmm. And as I was feeling dejected, I remember just leaving the room trying to compose myself. And all I can remember seeing is my chargers just running from the triage area, holding a baby, which I could even see from 20 feet away that baby was blue. And for the non-healthcare listeners to this show, that's a baby who's been without oxygen for some time. And as you had mentioned earlier, the great thing about emergency medicine is it is very much a team approach. And that's exactly what we did. We got into the whole team was there. I was there with my team of nurses were there. With respiratory therapy were there. And we got to work to try to resuscitate this child. This child was probably 3 months old. And after trying to resuscitate the child for approximately an hour, we just weren't successful. That baby had died. And that case bothered me quite a bit. Now, being in emergency medicine now had for several years, that wasn't my first pediatric death. I've had several, and they're all horrible. Every single one is horrible. But that one it tugged on me, Colin, for quite a bit, because I remember sitting at my workstation and I look at my tracking board, and my tracking board, to those who may not know, is a list of all the active patients in the emergency department. And I look at my tracking board, and in the hour that we were resuscitating that child, or trying to resuscitate that child, 8 patients had signed in to see me in the emergency department. Again, I'm by myself. Wow. And I remember my first thought, Colin, was, oh my goodness, how am I going to see all these patients and chart on them? That was my first thought, Colin. I remember saying to myself, Harry, you're such a jerk. You're such a jerk. You didn't even have time to grieve with the mother. You didn't even have time to grieve with the nurses. And heck, I didn't even have any time to just sit with my thoughts. My first thought, Colin, was, oh my God, I got to get back to the next patient so I could finish my charting. That was my first thought. And that's a huge red flag. But what happened later was actually even more of a red flag for me, and more of my turning point was, I went home. I did my shift. I went home that evening. And I remember walking in through the garage. I've got a beautiful wife and two young children. And I remember saying to myself, you know what, Harry, I don't want to tell my wife about my day. I don't want to burden her with what just happened. I go, and now in retrospect, that's a second red flag. and the third one that was really, really mind blowing for me is, at that time we had 2 young children. This was several years ago. And how we used to do it is, my wife would put one child to sleep and I would put the other child to sleep. And then we'd meet up afterwards and then just have some time for ourselves. So I put my boy to sleep. And I remember walking down to the office that I'm actually in right now. And I'm Googling the word physician burnout. And I'm saying to myself, Harry, you're in this dark office by yourself, Googling the word physician burnout. And I said to myself, and it was like a hammer that came to me. I go, Harry, when you're at the point in your life, when you're Googling the word physician burnout, you're already there. You're already there. And what I found, Colin, was what bothered me the most is there were really no good resources to help that doctor, to help that nurse go back to their shift the next day. There are great resources about, these weekend conferences, these week-long conferences, these weekend retreats, and those are all fine. Those are all needed. What I needed, though, Colin, is I needed to have a certain skill set so I can go back to work the next day, because I had to go to work the next day. And that's what I didn't find. And that's when I started to, as they say, scratch your own itch. And I created, this website, this Medicine Revived website, my website and my podcast, Medicine Revived, to talk about those specific things. I want a physician and a nurse to not have to go, that's not a good way to say it. I think many of us will go through something similar, but I want them to have a space where they can actually go there and find tangible, actionable resources to help them achieve wellness. And that's really what I've wanted to create.
Right, right. Well, number one, thank you so much for, sharing that. And I think that a lot of what we go through and the things that we ultimately create, unfortunately, needs to go through the path of being born out of struggle and being born out of, suffering, and I think that's one of the best motivators to be able to create something beautiful. There needs to be some sort of, resistance, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you just said it very eloquently. A lot of, we also have a lot of healthcare professionals that listen into this podcast as well. And it's basically, they can relate, they can, share that sentiment, in terms of, what you've learned so far, in terms of the burnout and the wellness. And I agree with you, not having those resources, and now it's becoming more and more highlighted. What were the top, things that you learned in terms of either challenges and lessons? Because you also teach it to others, on your website, which is a great, beautiful website, medicinerevive.com. You have a podcast, you're also a podcast host, and you have your own, academy. And you talk about the 3 common symptoms of physician burnout, which is physical and emotional burnout, lack of empathy, and no sense of purpose. And you have a 4-part course to teach others. What was the biggest, I guess, hurdles in a way that you took away, navigating through your own?
Sure. I think one of it is recognizing that burnout is real. And by that I mean is you hear about it a lot. Actually, it's a lot of residencies have these seminars for burnout. Burnout is real, and going through it is just miserable. The dark pit of burnout is real. That's number one. I think that needs to be said, because I think people almost kind of throw that word around like, yeah, I'm going through a little bit of burnout. No, being in burnout is very real and it's very miserable. Number two, that too many of us suffer in solitude, just like me, right? During that dark time, I was in my office, in this dark office by myself, not even reaching out. And I have a wonderful social circle, and I just felt very alone. So too many of us suffer in solitude. And number three is the way to get yourself out of it is you have to learn the lessons of leaders. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit about, Colin, is our lives, especially if you enter medical school or any other professional role, is our lives have been very, very scripted for medicine, for sure, right? It was college. For me, I took a little sidestep, went to paramedic school, but it was college, medical school, residency, and then finally I did fellowship as a toxicologist, but then an attending as well. It's very, very scripted. And we're not really taught the aspects of leadership. What happens a lot of times, I think this is where part of the problem is with burnout, is you are thrust into that role. You're thrust into that role of, okay, you were a 4th-year resident just yesterday, and all of a sudden now you're in charge of a department. That's the reality of it, though. Yeah. Right? As an emergency medicine, you're a senior EM resident June 30th, and July 1st, you're now in charge of a department. and no one's really given you those resources, those skills. You have to learn to become a doctor. You have to learn how to become a leader. And that's where I think is the secret to conquering this thing we call burnout, is we have to provide the resources to be a leader. As a medical director now, I am learning these every single day. And what I'm using is I'm using a lot of things that I'm learning as a leader and developing as a leader for my own personal well-being, to grow for my own personal wellness. And that's what I write about. And that's what I talk about on my website and my podcast is there's no weekend workshop that's going to fix this thing called burnout. You have to create the curriculum yourself, but you need a guide. You need some resource. And that's really what I focus on.
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely highly recommend, checking out his website and his course. And, it's, and I totally agree with you. You can't be, just how we need to eat every day, just how we need to incorporate physical fitness. And sometimes people are weekend warriors. You can apply that same analogy of, just doing things in bits, right?
Mhm.
I think number one is I really love the fact that you were open enough. And you were open enough to allow yourself to feel, just the simple, the ability to allow yourself to emote. And it goes back to what you were saying about how, yeah, we don't have these trainings, but at the same time is also being mindful that, we are human beings as well, just with a professional, skill set, right? But at the
Mhm.
same time, at our core, we're human beings. So it's kind of like, it's important to kind of see where your influences lie. It could be from your parents, if you had, parents. It could be from, a particular form of spirituality, religion, or lack thereof, your community, school, your social circles. And that all becomes, a part of who you are, growing up. And so your ability to be aware, self-aware, we hear things like emotional intelligence, emotional awareness, being the ability to be resilient, being adaptable. These different qualities and traits are very important to kind of guide us to, just knowing where we're at in a given moment of time. And so for a physician, we are thrusted into a situation, it could be a hospital situation, emergency surgical, situation, and being able to have that kind of what I like to call an emotional barrier of not having things, come through. But over time, it's not bulletproof. Like over time, it wears on you, you know what I'm saying? And you do your best to kind of put up a front. And, you even mentioned about Googling and not even sharing with your, wife and being not too much of a burden. Think about, applying that same thing with your best friend and,
Mhm.
your work colleagues. And then over time, many people would find it surprising that, one physician a day commits, suicide.
Right.
And, in a nation of where we're already short of physicians, that's a lot of physicians to lose, even before COVID. And now with COVID, it's like, we need that. So I'm really glad that you've taken upon yourself, to be open for the experience for you to contemplate, marinate, and process, and then have that be the motivator for you to create what you do.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
So, given that, because it's such a service to your colleagues, like what is that? How does that, do you see that change within your colleagues, whether virtually or in person? Like, what does that do for you to witness someone else change, given what you've learned and being able to dispense that for someone else? What does that mean
It,
to
it
you?
well, it's incredibly um, satisfying to hear it when a colleague will reach out to me and said, usually when my show will drop or my blog will drop, I'll usually get several texts from a colleague who listens to the show, and like, hey, those like, hey Harry, thanks so much, man. I didn't know about this, or thanks for the tips. What's actually really which really makes me smile so much from ear to ear is, being in emergency medicine, we get to speak with practically every single specialty that there is. And it's always great when, I'll speak with a consultant that I had called, and then we'll talk about the case, whatever the reason for the consult was. And almost as an ending to our conversation, like, hey, Harry, man, I listened to your podcast. That was great. I'm actually going to have, one of the things I talk about is have a weekly meeting with your spouse to get yourself
Mm,
set for the week. And like, hey, man, I appreciate that tip, and I'm actually scheduled for this coming Sunday. That makes me smile. That makes me smile because it's helping that one person. If that one person again tell another person, it's going to spread. And that's really what I always hope for is, take the things that I'm learning every day and that I've learned, and to continue spreading it, and to hopefully make this a revolution. Because I
yeah.
think we expect a lot from our hospital systems. And I want to mention this just for a moment, is as a medical director, I'm on that aspect of it too. I'm part of, the quote unquote system, but I'm also a clinician as well too. And I think many times there's this sense of, well, the system's got to do this for physicians, or the system's got to do this for the nurses. And I always go back and tell them, like, okay, I hear you and I understand you. And I understand that in order to help with things such as burnout, it does have to happen at the system level. But think about it. Think about the system that you're in. Think about the hospital system that you're in. Hospital systems are not getting smaller. They're actually getting bigger and bigger practically every single month. Mm-hmm. So your hospital CEO, your hospital chief clinical officer has so many things that he or she is responsible for. And I always equate it to, you are one person. Think of yourself as a speedboat, and think of the system as an aircraft carrier. If you need to pivot, if you need to change something, you can easily do it. Just go left or right. But for an aircraft carrier to make a left or right pivot, it takes a long time and it's very, very slow. So I always go back to them. I go, yes, I agree with you. I hear you. True change has to happen at the system level. But what are you doing? What are you doing today to help yourself become better today and to become better tomorrow? And that's really what I try to instill with my listeners, and is to do that. What are we going to do together? What are we going to do today to help lead you in that direction? I always try to tell people that I work with, I go, the best thing you could do is stop listening to me, because what I mean by that is you've received enough information that you can now create your own curriculum to get you to that place. That's my happy place. If I get you to create that curriculum for yourself so you can learn, grow, and thrive personally and professionally, and not need to come to me anymore, that would make me so happy. But that is my goal.
Hey guys, we're going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey guys, this is Dr. Colin Zhu, aka the Chef Doc. I just want to take a few moments of your time to talk to you about something that I feel needs to give reflection and pause for. Is there something interfering with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals? I know for me, I've been on the self-work journey for a decade now. And I remember in my personal experiences, through my doctor's journeys and also from traveling the world, I was always searching for the next step or thinking that happiness was a destination. However, it's not. What I found instead was that life was a process. And learning about life was also a process and a practice. And that the state of happiness and the state of joy and contentment was also a practice. For those of you who don't know, since I don't share that much on my podcast, is that I actually battle with anxiety, OCD, and in the past, episodes of depression. However, little by little, step by step, after seeking extra help, I've been able to achieve monumental things in my life that I've been eternally grateful for. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. BetterHelp is a sponsor of this podcast. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online. There is a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's counselor network, which may not be locally available in many areas. The service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room, as with traditional therapy. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches so they can make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. A couple of reviews. This is by Rebecca Raymer. Becky has literally saved my life by truly understanding me. She has given me self-talk strategies and different thought pattern exercises that have made me stronger and a more aware person. I am so grateful to have found her. I've been to so many different therapists and none have helped me like Becky has. This is another review for Adam Johnson. I've had counselors before, both on BetterHelp and in person through work. And Adam, by far, is the best counselor I've ever talked with. I feel like he actually listens to and what is going on. He asks questions to help you navigate your thoughts. And you can tell that he is listening and wants you to help you. Visit betterhelp.com/thechefdoc, that's better HELP, and join the over 1.4 million people taking charge of their mental state with the help of an experienced professional. Special offer for ThriveBite listeners, get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/thechefdoc, THECHEFDOC. Thank you for listening, guys, and back to the episode. Welcome back to Thrive Bites. Let's get back to the interview. And I love that too, because you and I love thriving, and we were talking about, and I'm really a big believer that in order to thrive within yourself, you have to be able to thrive together. And I think in this year of 21, it's I really truly believe the themes of unity and togetherness, and knowing that we are in this together. I know that we hear that a lot, but we can apply that same euphemism for everything, for medicine, because for a non-healthcare person, COVID really exposed a lot of the deep cracks within our healthcare system, right? And so on a systemic level, we do need to kind of, patch those cracks up. But, in terms of, we are the game changers. The physicians are the game changers, and we need to be able to rally together. And I love who you are as a person, not just what you've learned, but who you are in terms of being vulnerable. Because I think that vulnerability, you hear this a lot popularly with like speakers like Brene Brown and things like that. But it's really true, because being vulnerable allows you to be open, and being able to not be afraid to just open yourself up wide open, and trusting that someone will not hurt you, and not get hurt at the same time, right? But there's a power behind that vulnerability where, it gives someone else permission to think within their own lives, their own situation, and figure out how to pivot, figure out how to change, how to switch directions. And by being vulnerable, that helps someone else just by doing that. You know what I'm saying? And that is definitely a round of applause, just for that. So I definitely applaud you for, being open and being vulnerable.
Thank you.
So in terms of the system, I mean, if you had a magic wand, if I could snap my fingers, just like, the Avengers and, snap my fingers and be like, Harry, if we can do this all over again, or, take the DeLorean and go back into the past and change something, like what would you do differently, either in your own personal journey or in terms of the system as it's being built?
Sure. I would take lessons from leaders, learn to lead. And again, you don't need to be a leader by title. You need to be a leader just by your nature, and learn the lessons from leaders so you can grow in your personal and your professional life. And I think you're going to see an exponential increase in your own wellness is learn to lead. And it's not as scary as a term, because we're leaders. We all are all leaders, be it if you're, no matter what your position is by title, we are all leaders and we all have influence. So learn those lessons of a leader, and you're going to become a better and healthier and well person because of it.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. We were talking a lot about leading by example, and that's, that's a key thing. Harry, thank you so much for everything. I do definitely want to close out, the session. And I love asking this to all of my guests is, how do you personally thrive? Today we've talked a lot about, resilience, vulnerability, but within your personal life, you also, talk about thriving on your website. How do you personally thrive? Like what fuels your fire? In addition, what gets you up in the morning? What drives you to do what you do? And the second part of this question is, would you be able to give the audience 3 tips, how to reduce burnout and increase, your own wellness?
Sure. Uh, so how do I thrive? I can tell you,
Mm-hmm.
and this will be related to the tips as well, is I do 3 things. One thing is I have habits. I have rituals that I defend fiercely. I have an arise ritual and a sleep ritual. And many people know it as a morning and evening ritual, but sometimes I arise at 2 p.m. depending on the shift that I work, and sometimes I go to bed at 6 a.m. just because I sometimes have to work a night shift. So I have what's called an arise ritual, ARISE. And that means basically affirmations. So as soon as I arise in the morning, I give myself a quick affirmation. I always read 10 pages of whatever I want. I inhale. And by that, I mean, I take deep breathing exercises. I use Headspace. That's been what I've been using. It's been really successful for me, the Headspace app. I scribble. And by scribble, I mean I journal. And that has been one of the most powerful things that I could recommend your listeners is to journal. And I could talk about that in just a second. And E is to exercise, ARISE, and the E is the exercise. I get my exercise in the morning because if I don't do it, there's always some kind of excuse for me later on not to do it. So I make sure I get it done in the beginning of my day. And my sleep ritual is SLEEP. I stretch before I go to bed. I let go of electronics. And by that, I mean, I don't look at my phone for about 45 minutes before I go to bed. Now, part of my administrative duties is I have to be accessible, but I always keep my phone in the bathroom. And my team knows that if they ever need to get a hold of me, it's a phone call. It's not a text because I'm not going to respond to it. Because I'm not going to hear it, but also they know that I'm not going to respond to it because I think sleep is so important. But if they need to get a hold of me at 2 a.m, they have to call me. And I keep that in the bathroom. E is exhale. Again, it's breathing exercises that I use the Headspace app. So I use the Headspace app in the morning and I use it in the evening. And the other E is explore new ideas. And by that, I mean, I journal. I journal again, but this type of journaling is a little bit different. I just kind of put down thoughts that happen to me throughout the day. I just dump my brain onto the sheets of paper. And then the P is prepare for the new day. So prepare for the new day is I use the Michael Hyatt's the Full Focus Planner. I have it actually just to my right over here. And I know exactly what I'm going to be doing the next day. Michael Hyatt on his planner has what's called the Daily Big Three. And I write down my Daily Big Three the night before. So there's no guessing on what I'm going to do the next morning because I know what my big 3 are going to be for the next coming day. And I think I just want to talk about with journaling. Many of us are simply afraid to journal. I think many of us as type A personalities and perfectionists, perhaps, we are afraid to open up a journal and we're afraid of the blank page. And what I always tell people is if that is you and you don't know what to write in a journal, then use something called the 5-minute journal. The 5-minute journal, you can get it on Amazon. I think it's $27. And it gives you 3 writing prompts in the morning and 3 writing prompts in the evening. And that gets you started on the journaling process. And I guarantee you, I've yet to find anybody who's bought a second 5-minute journal because once you find the power of journaling, you're just going to buy yourself a blank journal once you finish your 5-minute journal, which should last you about 3 months. So those are some ways that I thrive. I also, one of the things that I found incredibly successful, Colin, is I thrive with my wife. And by that, I mean, every single week without fail, we have and I'll put it in air quotes here, a date night. And by that, I mean, we look at our Google Calendar and we print out the week ahead and we go through it hour by hour for the next coming week. So we all know where we're going to be. But more importantly, we know times that we just need to spend with each other and times that we need to spend for ourselves. So what we'll do every week, we'll give each other an afternoon or a morning, however the schedule works. So my wife, Francesca, you've got Friday morning. So I've got the kids in the morning and that's your time. You can do whatever you want with that time, but it just kind of sets us together and we go over our goals, we go over our dreams, we go over not just the week ahead, but the month ahead, 6 months ahead, 5 years ahead.
Mm.
And that's been so important for me on a personal level, but for the family as well. And that's, I think, one of my last tips that I would give your audience is take the time to schedule this time with your significant other, with your spouse, to have that time together, because if you don't schedule it, it's just simply not going to get done. It's like, oh yeah, maybe we'll do it on Sunday. Nope, you have to schedule it or it just won't get done.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially that definitely speaks to a lot of, people that are busy professionals, not necessarily healthcare professionals, but just busy, COVID has definitely shifted us to be more, indoors. But I feel like, for some of us, we're actually busier, and I think the tip of scheduling is super important. The tip of thriving with your significant other is even more important because, it goes back to what we're talking about, teamwork, right? And being able to lead not just you as a couple, but also lead you as a family, and knowing that, in order to thrive together, we also have to thrive from the aspect of me and my significant other.
Mm-hmm.
And I love your acronyms. They, I definitely picked up one or two. So, they were all very, very beautiful. Harry, thank you so much for being on the show and being able to share your experience and wisdom and your tips to thrive. Do you have, what are your, calls to actions? What would you like people to take away with, and how do people find you?
Sure. So I am on all the major social media platforms. I have a Facebook page. It's just facebook.com/medicine revived. I'm on Twitter at medicine revived, as well as Instagram. But really the best place is to just go to the website, medicinerevived.com. And really what I have for your listeners, Colin, is if you're interested in how to develop your own curriculum, how to get yourself to where you're at right now, to get yourself to a better place. And by that, I mean personally and professionally. I have just a free guide for your listeners. All they can do is just go to medicinerevived.com/start, medicinerevived.com/start. And you'll get started with a guide that I have for you. And as a spoiler, Colin, it's not that hard. It's not that hard. It's just three very intentional, but very simple, but very actionable tasks to get you started on that road toward wellness, personally and professionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Sounds great. I mean, I'm probably going to check it myself, but definitely go to his website and get your free guides. And Dr. Harry, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been such a privilege, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Guys, thank you for hopping on to another episode of Thrive Bites. If you like this, please like, subscribe, and follow. And if you feel that this was a benefit to someone else, please share it with them. Thank you, Dr. Harry, for being on the show.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure and a privilege. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Hey guys, that was another episode of Thrive Bites. If you like that episode, please subscribe and follow for new episodes. And don't forget to rate us on Apple Podcasts.